The wine glasses on my kitchen table should have been the first warning sign. 3 perfectly arranged Chardonnays, lipstick stains already marking the rims like battle flags. My wife Zoe sat at the head of our dining table like a general preparing for war, flanked by her 3 closest allies: Amanda, the HR director who spoke in corporate buzzwords; Jessica, whose Instagram followers hung on her every manufactured drama; and Rachel, the quiet accountant who collected secrets like vintage coins. "Ethan, sit down," Zoe said, her voice carrying that artificially sweet tone she used when addressing difficult clients at her real estate office. "We need to talk." Before we dive deeper into this story, I have one small request. Please subscribe, drop a like, comment, and hit that hype button to boost this channel so more people can discover these incredible Reddit stories. I'd been married to Zoe Mitchell-Bell for 8 years, long enough to recognize an ambush when I saw one. The formal setup, the strategic positioning, the way they all avoided eye contact while pretending to examine their manicures. This wasn't a casual girls' night that had run late. This was planned. "Let me guess," I said, setting down my work bag and loosening my tie. "Someone's getting divorced and needs emotional support? Or are we planning another surprise party I'm not supposed to know about?" Amanda cleared her throat, consulting her phone like she was reading from prepared notes. "Actually, Ethan, we're here for you. This is an intervention." The word hung in the air like smoke from a house fire. I laughed, the sound echoing off our granite countertops. "An intervention? For what? I don't drink excessively, I don't gamble, and I'm pretty sure my Netflix addiction doesn't qualify as a serious problem." "It's about your marriage," Jessica said, finally looking up from her phone. She was probably already composing the social media post about this moment. "We're concerned about how you're treating Zoe." I looked at my wife, searching her face for some sign that this was an elaborate joke. Zoe met my gaze steadily, her green eyes cold as January morning. No joke, no rescue coming. "How I'm treating Zoe," I repeated slowly, sinking into the chair across from them. "Okay, I'll bite. How exactly am I mistreating my wife?" Rachel opened a leather portfolio, because of course she'd brought documentation to my character assassination. "We've identified several concerning patterns in your behavior." "Patterns," I said. The absurdity was almost refreshing. After 10 hours of managing construction schedules and dealing with permit delays, at least this promised to be entertaining. Amanda took the lead, her voice shifting into full corporate presentation mode. "First, there's the issue of romance. When's the last time you planned a surprise date for Zoe? When's the last time you brought her flowers just because?" "Tuesday," I said. "I brought home Thai food from that place she likes on Maple Street, the one that's 20 minutes out of my way." "That's not romantic," Jessica interjected. "That's just dinner." "And there's the bedroom situation," Rachel added, her quiet voice somehow making the words more cutting. "Zoe's mentioned that you've become predictable." Heat crawled up my neck. "I'm sorry, are we really discussing my intimate life at the kitchen table? Because I'm pretty sure there are boundaries even interventions shouldn't cross." Zoe spoke for the first time since ordering me to sit. "Ethan, don't get defensive, we're trying to help." "Help with what exactly? I work 50 hours a week to pay for this house. I do half the cooking. I handle all the maintenance and repairs. I thought I was being a decent husband." "Decent isn't enough anymore," Amanda said. "Zoe deserves passion. She deserves a man who prioritizes her happiness." I studied the faces around my table. These women had been to our barbecues, had borrowed our lawnmower, had called me when their garbage disposals broke. Now they sat in judgment like a tribunal of suburban fates. "Let me get this straight," I said. "You've decided I'm an inadequate husband based on what? Zoe's complaints during your wine nights?" "It's not complaints," Jessica said quickly. "It's concerns. Valid concerns about whether you're meeting her emotional needs." "And what about my emotional needs?" The question escaped before I could stop it, revealing more vulnerability than I'd intended. The silence stretched uncomfortably. Finally, Rachel spoke. "This isn't about you, Ethan. It's about Zoe and what she needs to be happy." What she needs to be happy. The phrase echoed in my head as I looked at my wife. Zoe had been distant lately, working late more often, spending weekends at the gym or with these same friends. I'd attributed it to stress from her job, maybe the natural ebb and flow of a long marriage. Apparently, I'd been naive. "So what's the solution?" I asked. "What do I need to do to pass this evaluation?" Amanda consulted her phone again. "We've prepared a list of actionable improvements." Of course they had. I listened as they outlined their demands: weekly date nights, daily romantic gestures, a gym membership to address my physical decline, couples therapy to work on my emotional availability, and a complete overhaul of my boring personality. "You've lost your edge, Ethan," Zoe said when they finished. "You've gotten comfortable, complacent. I need a man who challenges me, who excites me." "I see." I stood up slowly, my mind strangely calm. "And if I don't make these changes?" The women exchanged glances. Zoe's mask slipped for just a moment, revealing something that looked almost like guilt. "Then we'll have to consider whether this marriage is still working." "Whether it's still working?" I repeated. Interesting phrasing. I walked to the kitchen counter, ostensibly to get a glass of water, but really to buy time to process what I'd just heard. My marriage was being evaluated by committee. My worth as a husband was being measured against some checklist these women had devised. And my wife was not only participating, but leading the charge. "You know what?" I said, turning back to face them. "You're absolutely right." They looked surprised. Apparently, they'd expected more resistance. "I have gotten comfortable," I continued. "I've been taking this marriage for granted, assuming that love and commitment were enough. Clearly, I was wrong." Zoe smiled for the first time all evening. "I'm glad you're being open to feedback, Ethan. This could be a real turning point for us." "Oh, it's definitely a turning point," I agreed. "In fact, I'm going to start making changes immediately." I walked to the hall closet and pulled out my overnight bag. The same bag I used for work trips, now being packed for a very different kind of journey. "What are you doing?" Zoe asked, her voice sharp with alarm. "I'm taking your advice," I said, heading upstairs to pack. "I'm going to work on becoming the kind of man who deserves better than this." The silence that followed was deafening. I could hear urgent whispers from the kitchen as I threw clothes into my bag, but I couldn't make out the words. Didn't matter. The message had been delivered loud and clear. When I came back downstairs, the intervention committee was huddled around Zoe's phone, their faces pale with panic. Whatever they'd expected from tonight, it wasn't this. "Ethan, wait," Amanda said. "We didn't mean you should leave. We meant you should try harder." "Try harder at what? Being someone I'm not? Performing for an audience that's already decided I'm inadequate?" I shouldered my bag. "Thanks, but I'll pass." Zoe stood up, blocking my path to the door. "You're being dramatic. This is exactly the kind of emotional immaturity we were talking about." "Emotional immaturity," I said. "Right, as opposed to the mature approach of staging an intervention with your friends instead of talking to your husband directly." "I tried talking to you," she protested. "You don't listen." "When? When did you try?" "Because I remember conversations about work stress, about money, about weekend plans. I don't remember any conversations about how miserable you apparently are." Jessica cleared her throat. "Maybe we should give you two some privacy to work this out." "No, stay," I said. "You started this party. You might as well see how it ends." I gently moved Zoe aside and opened the front door. The October air was crisp, carrying the smell of burning leaves and the promise of winter. It felt like freedom. "Where are you going?" Zoe called after me. "Somewhere I'm not a project," I said without turning around. Somewhere I'm not a disappointment. Somewhere I can figure out what I actually want instead of what everyone else thinks I should want. I loaded my bag into my truck and started the engine. Through the kitchen window, I could see the 4 women gathered around the table, their intervention having gone spectacularly off script. Zoe stood in the doorway, her arms wrapped around herself against the cold. 8 years of marriage, and it had come to this. A tribunal of suburban judges finding me guilty of the crime of being ordinary, of being human, of not being whatever fantasy they'd constructed in their wine-fueled girl talks. As I drove away, I felt something I hadn't experienced in months. Curiosity about what came next. The intervention was over, but my story was just beginning. The Riverside Motel wasn't much to look at, a relic from the 1970s that survived on the patronage of traveling salesmen and people whose lives had taken unexpected turns. My room smelled like industrial disinfectant and broken dreams, but it was clean and anonymous, perfect for a man who needed time to think. I sat on the polyester bedspread staring at my phone. 17 missed calls from Zoe, 12 text messages ranging from apologetic to angry to desperate. I ignored them all and opened my laptop instead. If I was going to figure out how my marriage had deteriorated to the point of requiring outside intervention, I needed information. And in the digital age, information left trails everywhere. Zoe and I shared an Apple account for convenience. Photos, calendars, location services all synced between our devices. She'd never been particularly tech-savvy, so I doubted she'd thought to change the settings. A few clicks confirmed my suspicion. Her phone's location showed she was still at home, presumably dealing with the aftermath of the evening's drama. But as I scrolled through the location history, I noticed something odd. For the past 3 months, Zoe had been spending a lot of time at places that didn't match her stated schedule. The gym visits were longer than any reasonable workout. The shopping trips included stops at restaurants I'd never heard her mention. Most interesting were the frequent visits to an address I didn't recognize, a high-rise apartment complex downtown. My phone buzzed with another call from Zoe. This time I answered. "Ethan, thank God. Where are you? We need to talk." "I'm somewhere with room service and cable TV," I said. "It's surprisingly relaxing." "This is ridiculous. You're acting like a child." "Am I?" Because from where I'm sitting, the childish behavior was staging a surprise attack with your friends instead of having an honest conversation with your husband. It wasn't an attack. We were trying to help you see that our marriage needs work. "Our marriage," I repeated. Interesting, because it sounded like the problem was specifically me. My lack of romance, my physical decline, my emotional unavailability. I don't remember hearing much about what you might need to work on. Silence on the other end. Then, "I've been trying to get your attention for months, Ethan. You're always working, always tired, always distracted. I felt like I was married to a stranger. So you decided the solution was to humiliate me in front of your friends. I thought if you heard it from other people, you might finally understand how serious this is." I pulled up her location history again, studying the pattern of unexplained visits. "How serious what is, Zoe? What exactly are we talking about here?" "Our marriage. The fact that we're like roommates instead of lovers. The fact that you haven't looked at me, really looked at me, in months. I look at you every day. No, you look through me. You see the woman who handles the grocery shopping and remembers to pay the electric bill. You don't see me." There was pain in her voice, genuine hurt that made my chest tighten with guilt. Maybe I had been distracted lately. Work had been demanding, and I'd fallen into routines that prioritized efficiency over connection. But that didn't explain the strange pattern of her whereabouts, or why she'd chosen public humiliation over private conversation. "Okay," I said. "Let's say you're right. Let's say I've been an inattentive husband. Why didn't you come to me directly? Why the intervention theater?" "Because I knew you'd make excuses. You'd promise to do better, and then nothing would change. At least with witnesses, You might actually follow through. Witnesses, I said, or judges, or executioners. Don't be so dramatic. Zoe, you and your friends spent 2 hours listing my failures as a human being. You discussed our intimate life with virtual strangers. You threatened the future of our marriage. How exactly should I be reacting? Another pause. When she spoke again, her voice was smaller, less certain. I just want us to be happy again. Were we ever happy? Or were we just better at pretending? The question hung between us like a bridge neither of us wanted to cross. Finally, Zoe sighed. Come home, Ethan, please. We can work this out. I need time to think. How much time? I don't know. A few days, maybe a week. A week? Her voice spiked with panic. Ethan, that's crazy. We can't solve anything if you're hiding in some motel. I'm not hiding. I'm getting perspective. There's a difference. What am I supposed to tell people? What am I supposed to tell my friends? Tell them the intervention worked, I said. Tell them I'm making changes, just not the changes they expected. I hung up before she could respond and turned off the phone. The room fell silent, except for the hum of the air conditioning unit and the distant sound of traffic on the highway. I opened my laptop and began a more systematic exploration of our shared digital life. Email accounts, photo streams, social media activity, all the breadcrumbs of modern existence. What I found painted a picture I hadn't expected. Zoe's Instagram, which I rarely checked, showed a carefully curated version of her life that barely included me. Photos from girls' nights out, gym selfies, professional headshots for her real estate business. When I did appear, it was always in group shots or distant couple photos with generic captions about date night or weekend fun. Her Facebook was more revealing. Private messages with her intervention committee showed weeks of planning for tonight's ambush. Screenshots of articles about revitalizing stale marriages and signs your husband has checked out. But most interesting were the references to someone named David. David thinks you're being too patient with E, Jessica had written 2 weeks ago. Maybe David's right, Zoe had replied. Maybe it's time to stop making excuses for him. David sounds like a smart guy, Amanda had added. When do we get to meet him? Soon, Zoe had written. I want to make sure about a few things first. David. I scrolled through months of messages, piecing together references to this mystery man who seemed to have strong opinions about my marriage. Zoe had been careful not to reveal too much in writing, but the pattern was clear. Someone named David had been advising her about her relationship problems, someone who thought she was too patient with her husband. I cross-referenced the timeline with her location history. The unexplained visits to the downtown apartment complex had started around the same time David's name began appearing in her messages. The long gym sessions coincided with text conversations about meeting up later. The shopping trips that included restaurant stops happened on days when she'd mentioned talking to David about the situation. My wife was having an affair. The realization hit me like a physical blow, knocking the air from my lungs. I sat in the cheap motel room, surrounded by the detritus of my hastily packed life, and felt something fundamental shift inside me. The guilt I'd been carrying about being an inattentive husband evaporated, replaced by a cold, crystalline anger. The intervention hadn't been about saving our marriage. It had been about creating justification for ending it. Zoe and her friends had spent the evening building a case against me, documenting my failures as a husband so she could walk away with clean hands and social approval. But they'd made one crucial mistake. They'd assumed I was the same complacent man who would accept their judgment without question. The same predictable husband who would apologize for his shortcomings and promise to do better. They were wrong. I opened a new browser window and began researching David Martinez, the only David connected to the downtown address from Zoe's location history. Real estate broker, divorced, member of Zoe's gym. His professional headshot showed a man in his early 40s with the kind of aggressive confidence that probably appealed to women who found their husbands boring. By 3 in the morning, I had a complete picture of my wife's double life. The affair had been going on for at least 3 months, possibly longer. Her friends knew about it, encouraged it, and helped plan tonight's intervention to give her moral cover for leaving me. I closed the laptop and lay back on the scratchy bedspread, staring at the water stains on the ceiling. 8 years of marriage, and it had all been a lie. Not just the recent months of distance and distraction, but the fundamental assumption that we were partners working toward the same goals. Zoe wanted out of our marriage, but she wanted to be the victim, not the villain. She wanted sympathy, not judgment. She wanted her friends to rally around her as the long-suffering wife who'd finally found the courage to leave her inadequate husband. Well, if she wanted a story, I'd give her one. Just not the story she was expecting. I turned my phone back on and typed a single text message. Take all the time you need to think about what you want. I'll be doing the same. Then I settled in to plan my next move. The intervention was over, but the real drama was just beginning. David Martinez's office occupied the top floor of a gleaming downtown high-rise, all floor-to-ceiling windows and minimalist furniture designed to intimidate clients into overpaying for overpriced condos. I'd done my homework on Zoe's lover, and everything about him screamed calculated success, from his Italian suits to his lease on a BMW to his carefully maintained social media presence. I'd called his office that morning, posing as a potential client interested in investment properties. His assistant had been eager to schedule a meeting with one of their premier agents. Apparently, David specialized in helping discerning clients find their perfect urban sanctuary. Perfect urban sanctuary. The kind of place where a married real estate agent might meet her boyfriend while her husband thought she was showing houses to legitimate clients. Mr. Thompson, David said, rising from behind his glass desk to shake my hand. He was exactly what I'd expected, tall, artificially tanned, with the kind of aggressive handshake that was supposed to convey dominance. Thank you for coming in. I understand you're interested in downtown properties. That's right, I said, settling into the leather chair across from him. I'm looking for something discreet, private, the kind of place where a man can entertain without worrying about nosy neighbors. David's smile was pure predator. I think I understand exactly what you're looking for. Privacy is a luxury in today's world, isn't it? Sometimes a man needs a space that's entirely his own. Exactly. Somewhere my wife doesn't need to know about. He laughed, the sound sharp and knowing. I completely understand. Marriage can be limiting. A successful man needs room to breathe, to explore his options. I studied his face, looking for any recognition of my name or connection to Zoe. Nothing. She'd been careful to keep her two worlds separate, which meant David had no idea he was giving marriage advice to the husband he was helping to betray. Tell me about your personal experience with downtown living, I said. Do you practice what you preach? Absolutely. I have a place in the Meridian Tower, 32nd floor, corner unit, incredible views. It's perfect for private meetings. The Meridian Tower. The same address that had appeared repeatedly in Zoe's location history. I felt a familiar surge of cold anger, but kept my expression neutral. That sounds ideal. What's the building like? Secure? Discreet? Very much so. Excellent security, professional management, residents who value their privacy. I've found it to be the perfect environment for conducting sensitive business. Sensitive business, I repeated. I like that phrase. Sometimes the most important transactions require careful handling, don't they? David leaned back in his chair, clearly enjoying what he thought was a conversation between two men who understood the rules of the game. Absolutely. Take my current situation, for example. I'm helping a client navigate a very delicate transition. She's been trapped in a stagnant relationship, married to a man who doesn't appreciate her potential. It's taken months of careful counseling to help her see that she deserves better. Counseling, I said. That's generous of you. It's an investment. She's brilliant, beautiful, ambitious, everything a successful man should want in a partner. But she's been held back by someone who's content with mediocrity, someone who's let himself go, stopped trying, stopped growing. Sounds like a familiar story. Unfortunately, yes. Too many people settle for comfort instead of passion. They choose security over excitement. It's tragic, really. I nodded sympathetically. And you're helping her see the light? I'm showing her what life could be like with a man who matches her energy. Someone who appreciates fine things, who knows how to treat a woman properly, someone who hasn't given up on himself. How noble of you. David missed the sarcasm entirely. It's not easy, being the other man in a situation like this. There's always the risk that she'll lose her nerve, go back to what's familiar even if it's killing her slowly. But I think she's finally ready to make the break. What makes you think that? She's been setting the stage, building a case for why the marriage isn't working, getting her friends involved, documenting the problems, creating a support network for when she finally pulls the trigger. I felt my hands clench into fists and forced myself to relax. Smart woman. Very smart and very thorough. She even staged an intervention with her husband last night, trying to give him one last chance to step up. Of course, he failed spectacularly. Walked out like a petulant child instead of fighting for his marriage. Imagine that. It's actually perfect. Now she can tell everyone she tried everything, that she gave him every opportunity to change. When she files for divorce, she'll have all the moral authority. Her friends will support her. Her family will understand. She'll be the victim, not the villain. And you'll be there to comfort her in her time of need. Exactly. It's a delicate situation that requires patience and strategy, but the payoff will be worth it. She's everything I've been looking for in a partner. I stood up abruptly, my self-control finally reaching its limit. You know what, David? I think I've heard enough about your investment strategy. He looked confused by the sudden shift in tone. I'm sorry, did I say something wrong? I thought we were talking about real estate. We were, but then you started bragging about stealing another man's wife. The color drained from his face. I don't know what you mean. Zoe Bell. Ring any bells? Married to a boring, complacent husband who's let himself go? Currently in the process of staging a moral justification for leaving him? David's mouth opened and closed like a fish gasping for air. Who? How do you? I'm Ethan Bell, I said, my voice calm. The petulant child who walked out of his intervention last night. The mediocre husband who doesn't appreciate his wife's potential. The man whose marriage you've been systematically destroying for the past 3 months. He shot to his feet, his face flushed with panic and anger. You need to leave, now. Oh, I'm leaving. But first I want you to understand something. You think you're playing a sophisticated game, but you're actually just a cliché. The slick real estate broker seducing the unhappy housewife. It's so predictable, it's almost boring. Get out of my office. You know what's really funny, David? You spent 20 minutes telling me how superior you are to Zoe's husband, but you don't actually know anything about him. You just accepted her version of events because it made you feel better about being a homewrecker. I said get out. For example, did she tell you that her boring husband owns a construction company? That he knows how to use tools, how to build things, and how to tear them down? David reached for his phone, probably to call security. I didn't stop him. Did she mention that he has friends in interesting places? Ex-cops, private investigators, people who know how to find information about anyone? People who might be curious about a real estate broker who specializes in helping married women find discreet apartments? You're threatening me. I'm educating you. See, you made a mistake when you decided to make my marriage your hobby project. You assumed I'd be too weak or too stupid to figure out what was happening. You assumed wrong. I walked toward the door, then turned back for one final observation. Oh, and David, you might want to check your professional insurance. I imagine your broker's license requires you to maintain certain ethical standards. It would be a shame if someone filed a complaint about your extracurricular activities. I left him standing behind his glass desk, his face pale with the dawning realization that his carefully orchestrated plan had just become infinitely more complicated. The elevator ride down 30 floors gave me time to think. David was exactly what I'd expected: arrogant, manipulative, and completely unprepared for actual consequences. He'd been playing a game he thought he understood, but he'd never considered what would happen if the other player refused to follow the rules. Zoe had chosen her champion poorly, but then again, she'd also underestimated her husband. I walked out of the building into the crisp autumn air, feeling more alive than I had in months. The intervention had been designed to make me feel small, inadequate, defeated. Instead, it had freed me from the illusion that my marriage was worth saving. Now, the real work could begin. I spent the next 2 days conducting surveillance from the coffee shop across from David's building. Not because I needed more evidence, I had plenty of that, but because I wanted to understand the full scope of their routine. Knowledge was power, and I intended to have all the power in this particular equation. Zoe's pattern was depressingly predictable. She arrived at the Meridian Tower every Tuesday and Thursday at 2 p.m., staying for exactly 2 hours before heading home to play the role of concerned wife. She'd even started texting me during these visits, asking when I was coming home and expressing worry about our relationship. The audacity was almost admirable. On Thursday afternoon, I watched her BMW pull into the building's parking garage right on schedule. 30 minutes later, I walked into the lobby and approached the concierge desk. "Excuse me," I said, putting on my most concerned expression. "I'm supposed to meet my wife here, but I can't remember the apartment number. Zoe Bell? She's visiting David Martinez?" The concierge, a young man who probably saw more extramarital drama than a soap opera writer, checked his computer. "Martinez in 3204. Would you like me to call up?" "No need," I said. "I want to surprise her." The elevator ride to the 32nd floor felt like ascending to a different world. One where my wife was someone I'd never met, where my marriage was a lie I'd been living for years without knowing it. The hallway was silent except for the hum of expensive air conditioning and the distant sound of classical music from behind one of the doors. Apartment 3204 was at the end of the hall, its door slightly ajar. I could hear voices inside, Zoe's laugh, bright and genuine in a way I hadn't heard in months, followed by David's deeper chuckle. They sounded happy, relaxed, like people who belonged together. I pushed the door open without knocking. They were on the couch, Zoe curled against David's side wearing nothing but his dress shirt, her legs bare and tangled with his. A bottle of wine sat open on the coffee table next to what looked like real estate contracts, their cover story probably, in case anyone asked what they were doing. "Don't mind me," I said, stepping into the apartment and closing the door behind me. "I was in the neighborhood and thought I'd drop by." Zoe screamed, scrambling to pull David's shirt down to cover herself. David shot to his feet, his face cycling through confusion, recognition, and panic in rapid succession. "Ethan," Zoe gasped. How did you—" "Find you." I settled into the chair across from them, making myself comfortable. "It wasn't exactly a challenge. You've been coming here twice a week for 3 months. Same days, same times, same parking spot. If you're going to have an affair, you might want to vary your routine." David had found his pants and was pulling them on with shaking hands. "Look, this isn't what it looks like." "Really? Because it looks like you're sleeping with my wife in your apartment while she tells me she's showing houses to clients. But please, enlighten me about what it actually is." Zoe stood up, her face flushed with embarrassment and anger. "You have no right to be here. This is private property." "Private property," I repeated. "Like our marriage was supposed to be private? Like our bedroom was supposed to be private before you started discussing it with your friends and your boyfriend? I never meant for you to find out like this." "How did you mean for me to find out? At the divorce hearing? When you served me papers and moved in with David full-time?" She looked away, unable to meet my eyes. That was answer enough. David had recovered some of his composure and was trying to reassert control of the situation. You need to leave. Zoe doesn't want to be married to you anymore. She's made her choice. Has she? I turned to my wife. Is that true, Zoe? Have you made your choice? She wrapped her arms around herself, suddenly looking very young and very lost. I didn't want it to happen like this. But it did happen. The affair, the lies, the intervention designed to make me look like the villain while you played the victim. It all happened. The intervention was real, she said defensively. Those problems in our marriage are real. Are they? Or are they just justifications you created after you decided you wanted to be with someone else? David stepped between us, his chest puffed out in a pathetic display of masculine protection. She doesn't have to explain herself to you. She's an adult who can make her own decisions. You're right, I said, standing up. She is an adult. Adult enough to have a conversation with her husband instead of staging a public humiliation. Adult enough to ask for a divorce instead of creating elaborate justifications. Adult enough to end a marriage honestly instead of sneaking around like a teenager. Don't lecture me about honesty, Zoe snapped. You've been emotionally absent for years. You stopped seeing me as a woman and started seeing me as a convenience. Maybe, but I never cheated on you. I never lied to you. I never brought a committee of judges into our home to tear you down in front of an audience. Those are my friends. Those are your accomplices. They knew about David, didn't they? They knew about the affair when they sat at our kitchen table and listed all my failures as a husband. The silence that followed was confirmation enough. Zoe's friends hadn't just known about the affair. They'd been part of the plan from the beginning. You know what the funny thing is? I said, walking toward the window that offered David's famous view of the city. I actually felt guilty after the intervention. I spent 2 days thinking about all the ways I'd failed as a husband, all the things I should have done differently. Maybe you should have, David said. Maybe if you'd been the man Zoe needed, none of this would have happened. I turned to face him, and something in my expression made him take a step backward. You think you know what kind of man I am, because Zoe told you stories that made her feel better about betraying her marriage, but you don't know anything about me. I know enough. Do you? Do you know that I've been supporting Zoe's real estate career for 5 years, even when it meant taking out loans to cover our expenses? Do you know that I've been the one pushing her to take risks, to go after bigger clients, to build the business she said she wanted? Zoe's face had gone pale. Ethan, don't. Do you know that I've been planning a surprise trip to Italy for our anniversary? That I've been working overtime for months to save up for it because she mentioned wanting to see Rome? Stop, Zoe whispered. Do you know that the reason I've been emotionally distant is because I've been dealing with my father's cancer diagnosis? The one I didn't want to worry Zoe with because her business was finally taking off and I didn't want to add stress to her life. The apartment fell silent, except for the distant hum of traffic 30 floors below. David looked like he'd been punched in the stomach. Zoe had started crying, tears streaming down her face as the weight of her choices finally hit her. But here's what I know about you, David, I continued. I know you're a predator who specializes in married women going through difficult times. I know you've done this before, the discreet apartment, the careful seduction, the patient campaign to undermine someone else's marriage. That's not true. Isn't it? Should we call Jennifer Patterson and ask her about her experience with your counseling services? Or maybe Rebecca Chen? I'm sure they'd have interesting stories about how you helped them see that their husbands didn't appreciate them. David's face had gone ashen. How did you... Like I told you before, I have friends in interesting places. Friends who know how to research public records, divorce filings, professional complaints. Your pattern is very clear once you know what to look for. I walked back to where Zoe stood frozen, her face streaked with tears and mascara. The intervention worked, by the way. Just not the way you planned. It showed me exactly who I'm married to and exactly what this relationship is worth. Ethan, please. We can work this out. We can go to counseling. We can fix this. Fix what? The lying, the cheating, the public humiliation? The fact that you've been planning to leave me while pretending to work on our marriage? I do love you. Part of me will always love you. Just not enough to be honest with me. Not enough to respect me. Not enough to end our marriage with dignity instead of turning it into a soap opera for your friends' entertainment. I headed for the door, then stopped for one final observation. You wanted a different kind of man, Zoe. Someone more exciting, more passionate, more dangerous. Congratulations. You're about to find out what that looks like. I left them in David's apartment, two people who'd thought they were writing a love story but had actually scripted their own destruction. The elevator ride down felt like a descent back into the real world, where actions had consequences and games had winners and losers. They'd played me for a fool, but the game wasn't over yet. In fact, it was just beginning. My best friend Jake Morrison had been a detective for 15 years before retiring to open a private investigation firm. We'd known each other since college, and he was one of the few people who understood that my quiet demeanor masked a very sharp mind and a very long memory. Jesus Christ, Ethan, he said after I'd finished explaining the situation. I knew Zoe was high maintenance, but this is next-level sociopathic. We were sitting in his office, a cramped space above a sandwich shop that smelled like pastrami and broken dreams. Jake's desk was covered with case files, coffee cups, and the detritus of a man who'd seen too much human ugliness to be surprised by anything. I need everything you can find on David Martinez, I said. Financial records, professional history, personal relationships, traffic tickets, library fines, everything. Already started, Jake said, turning his computer screen toward me. Your boy David has been a busy man. 3 complaints filed with the state real estate board in the past 2 years, all involving inappropriate relationships with married clients. Any convictions? No, but there's a pattern. He targets women going through marital problems, gains their trust, then systematically undermines their marriages while positioning himself as the solution to their problems. A professional homewrecker. More like a serial predator with a real estate license. Look at this. Jake pulled up a series of documents. Jennifer Patterson, divorced after a 6-month affair with David. Lost half her assets in the settlement. Rebecca Chen, same story. Lisa Rodriguez, ditto. What happened to them after the divorces? That's the interesting part. David dated each of them for about 3 months post-divorce, then moved on to the next target. None of them got the happy ending he promised. I studied the photos of David's previous victims. They all had the same look, attractive, successful women in their 30s who'd been convinced their marriages were holding them back. Women like Zoe. There's more, Jake said. David's got serious financial problems. He's leveraged to the hilt on that fancy apartment, behind on his BMW payments, and his real estate commissions have been declining for 2 years. I think he's targeting these women for more than just intimacy. Money? Money, connections, whatever he can get. Jennifer Patterson's divorce settlement helped him avoid bankruptcy. Rebecca Chen introduced him to her social circle, which led to several high-end clients. He's not just breaking up marriages for fun, he's doing it for profit. The picture was becoming clearer. David wasn't Zoe's knight in shining armor. He was a con man who'd identified her as his next mark. The affair wasn't about love or passion. It was about survival. What about Zoe's friends? I asked. Jake pulled up another file. Amanda, Jessica, and Rachel, the intervention committee. This is where it gets really interesting. He showed me a series of financial records and social media posts. Amanda had been through a messy divorce 2 years earlier and had been vocal about her belief that marriage was a patriarchal institution designed to oppress women. Jessica's husband had left her for a younger woman, leaving her bitter and vindictive toward all married couples. Rachel had never been married but desperately wanted to be, making her susceptible to anyone who promised insider knowledge about relationships. They're not Zoe's friends, I realized. They're her enablers. They want her marriage to fail because it validates their own failures. Bingo. Amanda's been feeding Zoe articles about emotional abuse and gaslighting. Jessica's been documenting everything for her social media followers. She's literally turning your marriage into content. And Rachel's been providing the pseudo-psychological analysis that makes it all seem legitimate. So the intervention wasn't about helping our marriage. It was about creating a public record of my inadequacy. Exactly. They needed witnesses to Zoe's victimhood. People who could testify that she tried everything, that you were impossible to reach, that she had no choice but to leave. I sat back in Jake's creaky office chair, processing the full scope of the conspiracy against my marriage. It wasn't just an affair. It was a coordinated campaign designed to destroy my reputation while elevating Zoe's. There's one more thing, Jake said. I ran a financial analysis on your joint accounts. Zoe's been moving money around for months, setting up a separate account that you're not on. She's also been photographing important documents, insurance policies, investment statements, property deeds. She's preparing for divorce. More than that, she's preparing for war. She wants to take you for everything you're worth while making it look like she's the injured party. I felt the last vestiges of guilt and self-doubt evaporate, replaced by a cold clarity I'd never experienced before. Zoe hadn't just betrayed our marriage, she'd declared war on my entire life. The intervention hadn't been a cry for help, it had been the opening salvo in a campaign to destroy me. What do you need from me? Jake asked. I need you to document everything. Every meeting between Zoe and David, every conversation with her friends, every financial transaction. I want a complete record of their conspiracy. And then? Then I'm going to show them what happens when you underestimate the boring, complacent husband. Jake grinned, the expression transforming his weathered face. This is going to be fun. No, I said, standing up to leave. It's going to be educational. I spent the rest of the afternoon making phone calls and setting plans in motion. If Zoe wanted to play games, I'd give her a game she'd never forget. But unlike her conspiracy of amateurs, my response would be professional, thorough, and absolutely devastating. The intervention had been designed to break me down, to make me accept responsibility for the failure of our marriage. Instead, it had freed me from any obligation to play by their rules. They'd wanted to see what I was really capable of. They were about to find out. The Riverside Country Club was Zoe's natural habitat, a place where successful women gathered to network, gossip, and reinforce each other's sense of superiority. She'd been a member for 3 years, using it as both a business development tool and a social sanctuary. It was also where she'd told me she was having lunch today, while actually planning to meet David at his apartment. I arrived at the club at exactly 1 p.m., dressed in my best suit and carrying a leather portfolio that suggested important business. The hostess recognized me as Zoe's husband and smiled warmly. "Mr. Bell! How nice to see you. Are you meeting Mrs. Bell for lunch?" "Actually, I'm here to surprise her," I said. "Could you tell me which table she's at?" The hostess checked her computer, then looked confused. "I'm sorry, but I don't show a reservation for Mrs. Bell today. Are you sure she's dining with us?" "She must be meeting friends," I said. "Maybe under Amanda Richardson's name?" More typing, more confusion. "I don't see a reservation for Ms. Richardson either. Would you like me to check if they're in the bar area?" "That's all right," I said. "I'll find them." Of course, there was no reservation. Zoe was 30 miles away in David's bed, not having lunch at the country club. But now I had a witness to her lie, someone who would remember that her husband had come looking for her when she claimed to be here. I made my way to the dining room, where I spotted my real targets, Margaret Whitfield and Susan Chen, 2 of the most influential women in Zoe's social circle. They were also notorious gossips who could spread information faster than a computer virus. "Ethan," Margaret called out as I approached their table. "What a lovely surprise. Are you joining Zoe for lunch?" "I was hoping to," I said, putting on my most confused expression. "But the hostess says she doesn't have a reservation. I must have misunderstood." "How odd," Susan said. "I could have sworn I saw her post about having lunch here today." "Maybe she's running late," I suggested. "You know how busy she's been with work lately. All those evening showings and weekend appointments." "She's certainly been putting in long hours," Margaret agreed. "Though I have to say, she seems happier lately, more energetic. Sometimes, a demanding career can be very fulfilling." "Absolutely," I said. "Though I do worry about her working so many evenings. Some of these clients want to see properties at all hours. Just last week, she had a showing that ran until almost midnight." Susan raised an eyebrow. "Midnight? That seems unusual." "I thought so too, but Zoe says that's when serious buyers are available. Apparently this particular client is very demanding. Wants to see everything multiple times, requires a lot of personal attention." "What kind of properties is she showing?" Margaret asked. "High-end downtown condos mostly. The Meridian Tower has been particularly popular. Zoe's been there several times with this client, really going above and beyond to make sure they find exactly what they're looking for." I watched their faces carefully, noting the moment when casual curiosity shifted to active interest. In their social circle, a married woman spending evenings at luxury condos with demanding male clients was the kind of information that demanded further investigation. "Well," Susan said carefully, "Zoe certainly is dedicated to her profession." "She is," I agreed. "Though between you and me, I sometimes wonder if she's too dedicated. She's been so focused on this particular client that she barely has time for anything else. But I suppose that's what it takes to succeed in real estate." I excused myself after a few more minutes of carefully planted seeds, leaving Margaret and Susan to process what they'd heard. By evening, half the country club would know that Zoe Bell was spending suspicious amounts of time with a mysterious male client at downtown luxury condos. My next stop was Zoe's real estate office, where I had a brief conversation with her assistant about the importance of client confidentiality and professional boundaries. I mentioned my concern about Zoe working such long hours with demanding clients, especially given the recent stress in our marriage. "I just want to make sure she's being careful," I told the young woman. "Some clients can become too attached to their agents, and Zoe's so trusting. I'd hate for someone to take advantage of her professional dedication." The assistant assured me that the office took client relationships very seriously and that she'd keep an eye on things. She also promised to mention my concerns to the managing broker, just to be safe. By 3 p.m., I'd made similar stops at Zoe's gym, her favorite coffee shop, and the dry cleaner she used. In each location, I played the role of the concerned husband who was worried about his wife's increasingly demanding work schedule and mysterious new client. I wasn't spreading rumors. Technically, I was simply sharing my genuine concerns about Zoe's professional situation with people who cared about her welfare. If those people chose to draw their own conclusions and share their concerns with others, well, that was just human nature. My phone buzzed with a text from Zoe. "Having lunch at the club with Margaret and Susan. They were asking about you." I smiled and typed back, "That's nice. I hope you're having a good time." Another text arrived an hour later. "Strange thing. They seemed to think you'd been looking for me there. Did you stop by? I thought about surprising you for lunch, but got tied up with work. Maybe next time." "Okay, love you." "Love you too." The lies came so easily to her now. I wondered if she'd always been this comfortable with deception, or if the affair had taught her new skills. My final stop of the day was the most important, a meeting with Thomas Bradley, the senior partner at the law firm that handled my business accounts. Tom was a shrewd man in his 60s who'd seen every variation of human duplicity in his 40-year career. "Ethan," he said, settling behind his massive desk. Jake Morrison filled me in on the general situation. I'm sorry you're going through this. I'm not looking for sympathy, Tom. I'm looking for strategy. Good. Sympathy won't protect your assets or your reputation. Strategy might. He opened a thick file and spread documents across his desk. Based on the information Jake provided, your wife is preparing for a contested divorce. She's been moving money, documenting assets, and building a narrative that portrays you as an emotionally abusive husband. Can she make that stick? Not if we're prepared. The key is controlling the narrative before she can deploy it. Right now, she thinks she has the element of surprise. She thinks you're the same passive man who will accept whatever story she tells. But I'm not. No, you're not. And that's going to be her downfall. Tom outlined a comprehensive legal strategy that would protect my assets while exposing Zoe's affair and the conspiracy behind it. It was elegant, thorough, and completely ruthless. The beauty of this approach, he explained, is that we're not attacking her character. We're simply documenting her actions and letting the facts speak for themselves. How long before we move? Soon, but first we need to let her make a few more mistakes. The more evidence she gives us of her deception, the stronger our position becomes. I left Tom's office feeling like a general who'd just reviewed his battle plans. Zoe and her conspirators thought they were playing chess while I was stuck playing checkers. They were about to discover that I'd been playing a completely different game all along. The intervention had been their opening move. Now it was my turn. The first crack in Zoe's carefully constructed facade appeared on Friday morning when she received a call from her managing broker. I was in the kitchen making coffee when her phone rang, and I could hear both sides of the conversation through the thin walls of our house. "Zoe, we need to talk," the broker said. "I've received some concerning information about your client relationships." "What kind of information?" Zoe's voice was tight with panic. "The kind that could affect your license if it's true. Can you come in this morning?" After she hung up, Zoe sat at the kitchen table staring at her phone like it might explode. I poured myself a cup of coffee and offered her one, playing the role of the supportive husband who had no idea his wife's world was collapsing. "Everything okay?" I asked. "Just work stuff," she said. "Some client is apparently unhappy about something." "That's too bad. I'm sure you'll work it out. You're great with clients." She looked at me suspiciously, as if trying to detect sarcasm or hidden meaning. But I kept my expression neutral, concerned only in the way any husband would be about his wife's professional problems. "I might be late tonight," she said. "I need to sort this out." "Of course. Take all the time you need." She left for her office looking like a woman walking to her execution. I waited 30 minutes, then called Jake. "Phase 1 is in motion," I told him. "How's the surveillance going?" "Like clockwork. David's been making calls all morning trying to figure out who's asking questions about him. He's also been researching private investigators, which suggests he knows someone's watching him." "Good. Paranoid people make mistakes. There's more. I followed up on those financial records. David's in worse shape than we thought. He's got about 2 weeks before his creditors start seizing assets. Which means he's going to pressure Zoe to accelerate their timeline." "Exactly. He needs her divorce settlement money, and he needs it fast." "Perfect. Let me know when they meet." I spent the morning at my office, handling routine business and maintaining the appearance of normalcy. But internally, I was tracking the cascade of consequences I'd set in motion. Zoe's professional reputation was under scrutiny. David's financial desperation was mounting. Their carefully planned affair was being exposed to sunlight, and like most parasitic relationships, it wouldn't survive the exposure. At 2 p.m., Jake called with an update. "They're meeting at David's apartment. Zoe arrived 20 minutes ago, and from the body language, it's not a romantic encounter. Can you get audio?" "Working on it, but the shouting is loud enough that I might not need electronics." An hour later, Jake sent me a text. "Lovers' quarrel in progress. She knows someone's been asking questions. He's blaming her for being careless. I smiled and went back to reviewing construction schedules. Let them turn on each other. Nothing destroyed a conspiracy faster than mutual accusations and shifting blame. Zoe came home that evening looking like she'd been through a war. Her makeup was smeared, her hair disheveled, and her hands were shaking as she poured herself a large glass of wine. "Rough day?" I asked. "You could say that." She studied my face carefully. "Ethan, have you been talking to people about our marriage?" "What do you mean?" "Someone's been spreading rumors about me, about my work, my clients, my personal life." I set down my beer and gave her my full attention. "What kind of rumors?" "People are saying I'm having an affair, that I'm meeting men at downtown condos instead of showing properties to legitimate clients." "That's terrible. Who would say something like that?" "I don't know, but it's destroying my reputation. My broker is threatening to suspend my license pending an investigation." "An investigation into what?" "Professional conduct violations. Inappropriate client relationships. They're treating me like some kind of predator." The irony was delicious, but I kept my expression concerned and supportive. "What can I do to help?" "I need you to tell people that our marriage is solid, that there's no truth to these rumors, that I would never cheat on you." I looked into her eyes, these windows to a soul I'd apparently never really known, and felt nothing but cold satisfaction. "Of course I'll support you. We're a team." She seemed to relax slightly. "Thank you. I know things have been difficult between us lately, but we can work through this." "Absolutely. Marriage is about supporting each other through difficult times." "Exactly. And right now I really need your support." "You have it. Completely." But even as I spoke the words, I was thinking about the final phase of my plan. Zoe thought she could use our marriage as a shield against the consequences of her actions. She thought she could manipulate me into providing cover for her affair while she figured out how to escape with minimal damage. She was wrong. That night, after Zoe had gone to bed, I received a call from Tom Bradley. "We're ready to move," he said. "I've prepared all the paperwork. Divorce petition, asset freeze, restraining order, everything you need to protect yourself." "What about the evidence?" "Jake's surveillance has given us more than enough. Photos, financial records, witness statements. We can prove the affair, the financial deception, and the conspiracy with her friends." "And David?" "He's finished. The real estate board will revoke his license within the week. His creditors are already circling. By the time we're done, he'll be lucky to find work selling used cars." "Good. What about Zoe's friends?" "That's the beautiful part. Once Zoe's reputation collapses, they'll abandon her to save themselves. Amanda can't afford to be associated with a scandal in her HR position. Jessica needs drama for her social media, but not the kind that reflects badly on her. Rachel will disappear the moment things get messy." So Zoe loses everything. Her marriage, her career, her friends, her reputation. Everything. Just like she planned for you. I hung up and walked to the window, looking out at the suburban street where I'd lived for 8 years. Tomorrow, this life would be over. The house, the routines, the comfortable illusions of marital happiness. All of it would be swept away in a tsunami of legal documents and public revelation. But I felt no sadness, no regret, no nostalgia for what I was about to lose. Zoe had made her choice when she decided to betray our marriage. Her friends had made their choice when they decided to participate in her deception. David had made his choice when he decided to profit from other people's misery. Now, they would all live with the consequences. I went to bed for the last time as Zoe's husband, sleeping peacefully beside a woman who had no idea that her carefully constructed world was about to collapse around her. Tomorrow, the real intervention would begin. I woke up early on Monday morning and made breakfast for Zoe, playing the role of the supportive husband one last time. She was still rattled from Friday's confrontation with her broker, but she seemed to believe that my public support would help her weather the storm. "I have a meeting with a potential new client today," she said, buttering her toast. "Someone interested in downtown properties." "That's great. I hope it goes well." "It's actually someone you know, David Martinez. He's a real estate broker himself, but he's looking to buy rather than sell." I almost choked on my coffee. "David Martinez? Do you know him?" "I've heard the name. Isn't he the one with the office in the Meridian Tower?" "Yes, that's him. He specializes in high-end properties. This could be a really good connection for me." The audacity was breathtaking. Zoe was sitting across from me, calmly discussing her plan to meet her lover while pretending it was a business opportunity. Even now, with her professional life crumbling around her, she couldn't stop lying. "Well, I hope it works out," I said. "Me too. I really need some good news right now." After Zoe left for her meeting, I made a series of phone calls. The first was to Jake, confirming that he was in position to document whatever happened at David's apartment. The second was to Tom Bradley, giving him the green light to file the divorce papers. The third was to my office, letting them know I'd be unavailable for the rest of the day. At 10 a.m. I drove to the courthouse and personally served Zoe with divorce papers at David's apartment building. She was walking out of the lobby, looking relaxed and happy for the first time in weeks, when the process server approached her. "Zoe Bell?" "Yes?" "You've been served." I watched from across the street as she opened the envelope and read the contents. Her face went through a series of expressions: confusion, shock, disbelief, and finally, pure rage. She looked around wildly, as if trying to spot me in the crowd, but I was too far away and too well concealed. She pulled out her phone and called me. I let it go to voicemail. She called again and again. Finally, I answered. "You bastard," she hissed. "How could you do this to me?" "Do what? File for divorce. I thought that's what you wanted." "Not like this. Not in public. Not with these accusations." "What accusations? I'm simply asking for a fair division of our assets and an end to our marriage. Isn't that what you've been planning?" "You know this isn't what I planned." "Really? Because according to my information, you've been preparing for divorce for months. Moving money, documenting assets, building a case against me. I'm just saving us both some time." "This is going to destroy me." "No, Zoe. Your choices are going to destroy you. I'm just making sure they don't destroy me too." She hung up, probably to call David or her friends or her lawyer. It didn't matter. By now, copies of the divorce petition were being delivered to every relevant party, along with comprehensive documentation of her affair and the conspiracy behind it. I drove home and began packing my belongings. I'd already arranged to move into a furnished apartment across town, a temporary base while I figured out what came next. The house would be sold as part of the divorce settlement, assuming Zoe could find a lawyer willing to represent her once the evidence became public. At 2 p.m., my phone rang. It was Amanda, Zoe's friend and co-conspirator. "Ethan, we need to talk." "About what?" "About Zoe, about the divorce, about those terrible things you're accusing her of." "I'm not accusing her of anything. I'm simply presenting facts to the court." "Those aren't facts. They're lies designed to hurt her." "Really? Which part is a lie? The affair with David Martinez? The financial deception? The intervention designed to create justification for leaving me?" Silence on the other end. "Amanda, you were part of this from the beginning. You knew about the affair when you sat in my kitchen and listed my failures as a husband. You helped create the narrative that Zoe was a victim instead of a cheater. We were trying to help your marriage. No, you were trying to help Zoe escape her marriage with her reputation intact. But now that her reputation is destroyed anyway, I'm curious, are you still planning to support her?" More silence. "Because I have documentation of your involvement. Text messages, emails, witness statements. If this goes to trial, your participation in the conspiracy will become public record. I wonder how your HR department will feel about that. You can't threaten me. I'm not threatening you. I'm educating you. Zoe's ship is sinking, Amanda. You can go down with it, or you can distance yourself and save your own career. Your choice. She hung up without another word. Similar conversations followed with Jessica and Rachel. By evening, Zoe's support network had evaporated, leaving her alone to face the consequences of her choices. At 6 p.m., Jake called with an update. David's been served with a subpoena to testify in the divorce proceedings. He's also received notice that the real estate board is suspending his license pending investigation, and his landlord just posted an eviction notice on his apartment door. How's he taking it? About as well as you'd expect. He's been calling Zoe nonstop, but she's not answering. I think she's finally figured out that he's not the knight in shining armor she thought he was. And Zoe? Holed up at the Riverside Motel, same place you stayed. Ironic, isn't it? It was ironic. Zoe had ended up in the same cheap motel where I'd gone to think about our marriage, except she was there because her life had collapsed, not because she was planning her next move. That evening, I received one final call from my wife. Ethan, please, can we talk? We are talking. I mean in person, face to face. There are things I need to explain. Such as? The affair. It wasn't what you think. David convinced me that you didn't love me anymore, that you were planning to leave me. I was scared and confused, and he took advantage of that. So now David's the villain, and you're the victim? I'm not saying I'm innocent. I made terrible mistakes, but I never meant to hurt you. You staged an intervention designed to humiliate me in front of your friends. You discussed our private life with your lover. You planned to divorce me while taking half of everything I'd worked for, but you never meant to hurt me. I was confused. I didn't know what I wanted. Yes, you did. You wanted David's lifestyle, his money, his excitement. You wanted out of our boring marriage and into something more glamorous. The only thing you didn't want was to look like the bad guy. That's not true. Isn't it? Then why didn't you just ask for a divorce? Why the elaborate deception? Why the character assassination? She didn't have an answer for that. Zoe, you made your choice when you decided to cheat instead of communicate. You made your choice when you decided to lie instead of being honest. You made your choice when you decided to destroy our marriage instead of trying to save it. And what choice are you making? I'm choosing to move on, to find someone who values honesty over deception, partnership over manipulation, love over convenience. I did love you. Maybe, but you loved the idea of something better more. So that's it? 8 years of marriage and you're just walking away? No, Zoe, you walked away months ago. I'm just making it official. I hung up and turned off my phone. There was nothing left to say, no relationship left to salvage, no future to plan together. The intervention had ended our marriage, but not in the way anyone had expected. 6 months later, I ran into Margaret Whitfield at the grocery store. She told me that Zoe had left town after the divorce was finalized, apparently moving to another state to start over. David had declared bankruptcy and was working at a used car lot in the suburbs. Amanda had been quietly transferred to a different department at her company. Jessica's social media following had evaporated after the scandal. Rachel had simply disappeared from their social circle entirely. It's such a shame, Margaret said. Zoe seemed like she had everything going for her. She did, I agreed. She just didn't appreciate it. I never saw Zoe again. The divorce was finalized without drama. The assets divided fairly despite her attempts to hide money and manipulate the proceedings. I kept the construction business, she kept her tarnished reputation, and a hard lesson about the consequences of betrayal. The intervention had been designed to fix our marriage by fixing me. Instead, it had revealed that our marriage was beyond repair, and that I was the only one who didn't need fixing. Sometimes the best intervention is the one that shows you the truth, even when the truth destroys everything you thought you knew about your life. especially then.